Bhagavad Gita, Chapter-2, Part-2.
We have the Vedic way of life. Then later, with the Brahmanization of Indian culture, it produced the Puranic culture, where the Puranas were popular, studied by the people. And then we have very ancient systems like yoga and meditation. They go back to pre-Vedic times, even before the Vedas. And then we have the classical darshanas, or the most philosophical darshanas, which are called Shad darshanas. Shad means six, because there are six darshanas. The word darshan itself means a vision. This was six systems of philosophy compiled by rishis who were very profound visionaries, and they have tried to explain the same perennial problem, the same question: how did this world come into being? What is human destiny? How can human beings save themselves from misery? How to be happy and how to gain immortality? How to get salvation? These are the same questions. There is no difference between the Puranic mythological stories or the classical darshanas when we come to these fundamental questions. But the approaches are different. In the Puranas, the myth is used, the medium of story is used. In the darshanas, they are like scientific texts where the knowledge is given in a very systematic, scientific way, and it is very intellectual, so it can never be popular. They are studied mostly by scholarly-minded people. Of these Shad darshanas, the Sankhya darshana is considered to be the oldest. Sankhya darshana was a heterodox darshana. They don't have a god in Sankhya darshana. But by the help of Sankhya or numbers, Kapila Muni explained the creation of the world. And he gave some of the basic concepts which have been used by all other systems, like Prakriti, Purusha, Gunas. These ideas that we speak of, Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna, Tamo Guna, these are the contributions of Sankhya philosophy. But the Sankhya that has been used in the Bhagavad Gita is not exactly like the Sankhya of Kapila Muni. There are slight revaluations. The Gita has adopted Kapila's Sankhya for its own purpose as a rationalist system. The second chapter here is divided into two parts, Sankhya Yoga and the Buddhi Yoga, or the Yoga aspect. First is the theoretical aspect, where we are given pure knowledge about the distinction between the self and the non-self. That is reasoning according to Sankhya. And the second half of the second chapter takes you to reasoning according to Yoga. Reasoning according to Yoga is the cancelling of counterparts. It's a dialectical methodology. When we speak of dialectical methodology, it means there are two counterparts. In this case, it is Arjuna and Krishna. They are the two counterparts. One is the question, the other is the answer. And between them, by the interaction of these two counterparts, which is known as the dialectical situation, then there is a resolution, and we come to the knowledge which is neutral, which is happening between these two participants. This is the beauty of the dialectical method or the yogic method, where you are cancelling the counterparts to come to a new synthesis in the middle or the central position. In the first half, Sankhya Yoga, Arjuna is given first the distinction between what is the perishing body. He is worried about death, killing of his relatives. So Krishna tells him first of all that you are worried about something for which you should not be worried. You are worried about the physical body which is bound to perish. But there is an indwelling spirit, or there is the self which is so subtle, which cannot be cut by a sword, which cannot be wetted by water, which cannot be burnt by fire. This is the real essence. That is indestructible. So knowing this to be indestructible, you have no reason to feel any grief. With this teachings, we come to around the center of the second chapter. And at the middle of the second chapter, we find the shift takes place to the yogic way of thinking. We stopped at the 28th verse, where he says, beings have unmanifested origin, manifested middle states, and an unmanifested termination. Because before we were created, we were non-existent, and after death also, this body will not exist. So what was there before manifestation? What will be there after manifestation? We do not know. It is unknown. We only experience the middle state of manifestation. That is the truth. That is the reality. And then he says, Ascharyavat pashyati kaschidenam. Ascharyavat vadati tathaiva cha anyaha. Ascharyavat chai anyam shrunoti. He uses three words here. Pashyati, vadati, and shrunoti. Pashyati means to see. Seeing here need not mean with the eyes, but it can also mean the visionary seeing. And vadati means to speak, and shrunoti means to hear. So these are the three methods by which this absolute or the supreme or Brahman is described. Some people see it, they visualize it, and they speak about it. Others who are seekers, they hear about it. But this absolute is so elusive, it is so subtle, it is so wonderful that none of these methods can adequately describe it. So even though we speak about it, yet we find we cannot speak enough about it. And even though we hear about it, we will never find a point when we've heard enough about it. So the absolute is not to be understood as something fixed or static. It is not a fixed thing. It is like a dynamic, ever fresh, like a constantly flowing, expanding, developing, transforming wonder that can never cease to fascinate. People who have the absolutist vision, they are always in a state of wonder. Their life is filled with wonder all the time. Continuous experience of this wonder of joy, wonder of the absolute. So this is why he said, Ascharyavat kaschid enam shrunoti. Somebody speak of it as a wonder, some hear of it as a wonder, some see of it as a wonder, but nobody understands it at all. Nobody can fully comprehend this wonder. Now we come to a kind of punctuation here. For the next 5 or 6 verses, we find that the teaching shifts. It's just like a rise and fall. If you hear music, you will see occasionally the music will rise to crescendo, then it comes down low. Similarly, the Gita also being a song, you find Krishna also. His teachings take you high and then he brings you back to simple things again. So here too, after he speaks of this high absolute, the next few verses talk of very ordinary values, consoling values. Like you're consoling a friend, Arjuna is being consoled by Krishna. Dehi nityam avadhyo ayam dehe sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam sochitum arhasi. The embodied one within the bodies of all is ever immune to killing. So he says, Dehe asmin yatha dehe. Dehi nityam avadho ayam. Avadhyah nityam, ever immune to killing. That is the indweller or the embodied one within the body is ever immune to killing. And what he says here is sarvani bhutani, of all beings. So not just limited to human beings, but all living beings have got this spirit in them which is immune to killing. Tvam na arhasi sochitam. Therefore you should not regret. Don't have any shoka. Don't feel any sorrow. Because the indwelling within has no destruction. It is immune to killing. You see, there is only chemistry going on at the physical level. Today, with all the scientific knowledge we have, modern knowledge, we know that the body process is nothing but chemistry. It is the food we eat, the air we breathe, and all the actions we are carrying out, our thought process, our various movements, everything is nothing but electrochemistry. There are chemical reactions going on inside us, and electric currents are passing through the nervous system, and various cells are broken down when we say digestion is taking place, and that is being carried to different parts of the body to be absorbed, and the waste matter is being expelled out. So it is like a massive laboratory going on, with nothing but chemical reactions going on as far as the physical form is concerned. But in this physical form there is the principle of life, that we have the sense of living, we have a sense of values. This is not chemistry. That part comes from the spirit, that is the embodied self. And that source, that foundation of the self, that is immune to killing. That has nothing to do with birth and death. But the psychosomatic system, the body system, which is undergoing transformation, this is part of the transformation. Nobody can stop it. You may slow it down, you may prolong, but nobody can stop it. It is part of nature. It is natural. So therefore, being a wise person, you shall not grieve that these transformations are taking place. You see, this war is being fought. It is the will of God which is making this war happen. And only in this context is the killing legitimate. Normally we would say killing is sinful or wrong, and ahimsa, non-killing, is proper. But in this context, it is a righteous war to protect the dharma, to protect the righteousness, to protect the law. And it is under the sanction of divine Lord itself. Therefore, it is okay to kill in these circumstances. Further, having regard for the pattern of behavior, now comes the use of the word swadharma for the first time. When he says, Swadharmam apicha avekshaya na vikampitum arhasi. Arjuna's swadharma is of a kshatriya, of a warrior. and therefore he has to have regard for his Swadharma, natural to him. You have no reason for vacillation. Later on, this idea of Swadharma is developed in the Gita. It is one of the contributions of the Gita, that we should know what is our Swadharma. If we want to be happy in life, if we want to feel in harmony with creation, we should know what is our Swadharma, and we should do our Swadharma. Swadharma means one's own dharma. Swa means one's own dharma. What is natural to one's own person. In today's educational circles, you say vocational guidance. What is your aptitude? What interests you? What field interests you? Where can you bring out your potentials? Where do you feel a natural interest? Where can you contribute the most? Where you fit in? That is most important. So that is knowing your Swadharma. If you have paradharma is very dangerous. Paradharma means doing somebody else's dharma. Later on he will say, even if you do paradharma, even though it is superior, it will be full of fear. The person who does paradharma is bound to be full of fear. Whereas Swadharma, even if it is not superior in the eyes of society, it is better to do one's Swadharma, because by that you will be in tune with your true nature and also in harmony with the cosmic creation. You say you find your slot where you fit in. This is the first time he uses the word Swadharma. In this context, Arjuna's Swadharma was to be a fighter, to be a warrior, not to be a mendicant. He wants to give up the battle and take up the life of a sannyasi. Sannyasi's life is a negative life, withdrawal from action, withdrawal from activity, and living in contemplation, living in thinking, life of thought. And the life of a warrior is a life of action. He has to be active on the battlefield. He must function, he must act. So Arjuna was doing violation to his Swadharma when he said, I want to abandon, apparently superior. The sannyasi, the renouncer, the tyagi is considered superior in the eyes of the world, in the eyes of society. And the Kshatriya is not as superior as the renunciate. But because it was not his Swadharma, it would have been wrong for him to abandon his Swadharma and take up the life of a mendicant. So there could be nothing more meritorious, because merit comes by doing Swadharma. In the spiritual sense, merit will come to you by doing your Swadharma, not by doing Paradharma, though it appears is apparently superior. So there are stories in the Mahabharata of the person who went into the forest and he performed penance for 12 years. And after 12 years, while he was praying, doing his morning sandhya in the river, a crow is dropping into his hands. So he looked up at the bird with anger and the bird died. So he was very proud that he has got some siddhi now. And with this pride he walked into the village. He was hungry. He stood outside a house for bhiksha. But the woman in the house, the housewife, she was looking after her husband who was invalid. So she told this Maharaj, he said, please wait. After attending to my husband, I shall come and serve you. When he heard this, Maharaj got very angry. But the lady said to him, don't think I am that bird who will die by one of your looks. And he heard this, he was surprised. How did you come to know this? And she said, you would like to get to know the secret? Go to the end of the road. There is a butcher there. The butcher will teach you. So the holy man felt even more surprised that he should learn this wisdom from a butcher who does such nasty work, unclean job of killing and selling meat. But the moral of the story was that these people were doing their Swadharma, and by doing their Swadharma they gained a wisdom which was equal, if not better, than the person who had abandoned everything and gone into retreat. So such is the value of Swadharma, and this is the greatest stress that the Gita has given in its later teachings, and the contribution of Swadharma. How do we find our Swadharma? We have an analytical method here. The gunas and the Kshetra Vibhaga Yoga, Shraddha Traya Vibhaga Yoga, Deva Suri Sampatti Vibhaga Yoga. 3 chapters are there, diagnostic chapters. These chapters help us to discriminate, distinguish, analyze ourselves and discover our own Swadharma. True warriors have reason to be happy, O Partha, to have the chance of such a war presenting itself unsought before them as an open door to heaven. The other thing is, for a Kshatriya to fight a righteous war, it is a door to heaven. It's the most meritorious thing. thing to do. If, on the other hand, you do not take to this battle which conforms to the requirements of righteousness, then thwarting what is consistent with your own nature and your good repute, you will become involved in evil. So the word pap also comes here. He says you will get involved in sin, or papa will come to you. But papa here means regret or negative state will come to you, because his feeling was a mood which had come over him, and once that mood passes, he would have regretted that he did not carry out his duty, carry out his swadharma. So Krishna is pointing out that to him, that if you do not take to this battle which conforms to the requirements of righteousness, sangramam dharmyam, so you should follow your dharma. When it is conforming to your dharma, if you don't do it, later on you will feel the regret. And that regret is equal to the papam, avapsyasi papam. You will become involved in sin. Sin, pap, in India also has got many connotations. In the Jain system, pap means when we shrink. When a person shrinks into himself, that is called papam. Punyam is when you expand. Supposing a person becomes generous or he becomes helpful to other people, you see, he expands, his consciousness expands, his personality becomes wide. So that is a punyam. Supposing a person becomes self-centered, you say he shrinks, he becomes contracted, and that is a papam. So the Jains considered punya papam in this manner, where you are expanding or you are contracting. Here it is meant in the sense of regret and negative state. When you get caught in a negative state, that is as good as a papam. He is coming to a section where he is talking of very commonplace values, not even religious values, like honor, dishonor, and calumny. When he says, living beings will pronounce a never-ending verdict of calumny on you, and one used to honor, dishonor is worse than death. Because when they see Arjun leaving the battlefield, they will not realize that he is leaving out of some deep, profound feeling. He is pitying them or he is compassionate. They will think that he is leaving because he could not fight, because he is fearful, and they will make fun of him, they will ridicule him. So that is the calumny. And to one who was so used to honor, this is worse than even death. The great car generals, Maharathaha, will look upon you as quitting the battle from fear, and having been honorably looked upon by them, you will be held in derision. Those against you will speak in unspeakable terms, scorning your ability. What pain could there be keener than this? So these verses, Arjuna is being consoled. He has heard the highest of philosophy, according to the Sankhya system, speaking of the immortality of the soul. And now he has come to the social level, that even if you don't fight, society will laugh at you. The generals will laugh at you. You will be scorned. You will not be able to live in peace after this. Dying, you will gain heaven. Winning, you will have the enjoyment of the earth. He was earlier arguing in two ways, that I don't want to kill these gurus. I should worship these gurus, Drona and Bhishma. Here, Krishna is giving him a reply in the same way, of a double reply, as it were. That is, dying you will gain heaven, and winning you will enjoy the earth. Because for a Kshatriya to die in a battlefield, it was a noble thing. It was a gateway to heaven. So he would have gone into heaven. That was his advantage, his gain. And if he won, then he could have the enjoyment of the earth. Therefore arise, O Kaunteya, make up your mind to fight. Now we come to the second section, the yoga section. Equalizing both pleasure and pain, both victory and defeat, and gain and loss. Enter wholly into battle. This way you will avoid sin. Beforehand, do not think of the result, the fruit, but thinking only of your dharma, your duty, and what should be done, what is proper. With that attitude, you enter into the battle. He says, what has just been taught is reasoning according to Sankhya. But here now the same according to yoga, attaining the unity of which reasoning you will be able to throw off the bondage of works. Now yoga, as we said, is a more orthodox system, and just like Sankhya was the Kapila Muni's heterodox system, which did not include any god in its system, Patanjali Yoga brought in Ishvara. He accepted the categories of Sankhya and he added one more called Ishvara, Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And this is more orthodox because it has a connection with Vedism. When we talk of Brahma, Brahma Vidya, if we talk Brahman, Brahman is related to Vedas. So it means it is an orthodox system. In such a path there is no forfeiture of any merit. Abhikramano nasho asti, pratyavayo na vidyate, swalpam api asya dharmasya, trayate mahato bhayat. Just a little bit of this practice or way of life saves one from great apprehension. All the fears can be removed just by a little bit of this practice. So in the Bible we have Christ saying, a little leaven that leaveneth the lump. If you want to make sourdough, you need to take only a small piece of sourdough and it can make all the dough sour. Similarly, little bit of this practice can make a big difference in your life. It can remove all the fear, save one from great apprehension. Vyavasayatmika buddhir eke iha kurunandana bahushaka hi anantascha buddhayo avyavasayinam. Here, O prize of the Kurus, the well-founded reasoning is unitive, but many branched and endless are the reasonings of those in whom reason is ill-founded. The whole idea of yoga, when you say unitive thinking, your reasoning becomes unitive. Eka buddhehi, you are able to think in a unitive fashion. Whereas bahu shakaha, many branched and endless reasoning are those in whom reasoning is ill-found. Now, Vedanta and Veda, though Vedanta arose from the Vedas, it speaks disparagingly about the Vedas and it criticizes the Vedas because the Vedas cannot lead you to liberation. Vedas cannot take you out of the gunas. Only Vedanta can take you out of the gunas. And so in the Gita we find many places the Vedas are being criticized. This particular verse is one of them. Kamatmanam swargapara janma karma phala pradam kriya vishesha bahulam bhogaishwarya gatim prati. And yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadanti avipaschitaha vedavadarataha partha na anyad asti iti vadinaha. Such flowery speech as uttered by the foolish, adhering to the doctrine of the Veda, negating any other transcendental verity, the self of which is nothing but desire made, holding heaven to be the highest goal, offering only birth as the result of good works, abounding in many special observances, which aim at enjoyment and domination. In the case of those whose minds are under the sway of such teachings, who are attached to enjoyment and domination, a well-founded reason does not come under the sway of the peace of contemplation. So it is only through contemplation that a person can resolve the dualities of life and come down to the real unity and the reality of the essence, not through the Vedic sacrifices. Because the Vedic sacrifices, they are still desire bound, there is still a sense of domination and there's a heavenly thinking, the think of Swarga, going to heaven. So this is the two small distinctions to be made when you say Vedic Hinduism and Vedantic Hinduism, or the contemplative aspect of Hinduism. Contemplative aspect of Hinduism is much superior in values compared to the Vedic Hinduism. The Vedas treat of matters related to the three gunas, and Vedas can never lead you to full salvation because you will still be in the gunas. Vedas can make you at the most very sattvic. You can become a very sattvic person. You should be free. That is a supreme Vedic person. When you talk of the Brahmana or the scholar or the wise person in the Vedic context, it's a person endowed with sattvic nature. But he has not got over the sense of ego. Egoism will still be there. And the sense of domination will still be there. And these relativistic values, that is bound to be there. So the true freedom can only come by contemplation. And you can still work as a contemplative, you can still carry out all functions, but you have the superiority of working as a free agent, free from relative pairs of opposites, established ever in pure being. When you talk of pure being, that is the essential self, without any yoga or well-being as dual factors, unitively self-possessed. See, the Vedic way is confusing because there are many, many different possibilities, varieties and shades of meaning. Whereas the unitive way, contemplative way, that is leading us to one, the one essential reality. So Vedic way confuses the mind of the seeker because of the triangular situations. Because the person is there, the deity is there to whom you are worshipping, and then the wish is there, or the need. You are always worshipping God for some motive. So the person, the motive, and the deity becomes a triangular situation. But in yogic way or contemplative way, the motive is not important. It becomes whatever comes by the grace of God. So the relationship between the Absolute or the Supreme Self and the votary, the seeker, that is the only relationship. Bipolarity is involved, two poles only. And there is no third factor coming in. So it is considered a superior relationship rather than the Vedic methods where the triangular situation comes. So bipolarity of interest, which is a prerequisite for yogic reasoning, is thus violated. That is why in yogic way of life we say Guru Shishya Parampara. If you don't have a living Guru, we say we have a Shastra or a teaching or a way of life to which we stick. Keep the absolutist relationship without any deviation. So that is the main difference between the Vedic and the Vedantic. So what happens to the Vedic in the Gita? It says Vedic way is like a well of water. The Brahmana is like a person going to his own well, his particular well, from which he draws his water. But Vedantic is like having a flood. It's so much of water that all the wells become submerged in that one vast pool of water. So that is how it's described here too. There would be as much use for all the Vedas to a Brahmin of wisdom as there could be for a pool of water when a full flood prevails all over. So it encompasses. It does not reject, but it includes in a wider sense. That is the advantage. Your concern should be with action as such alone, not for any benefits ever. And this is the famous verse which says, Karmanyeve adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. This is one of the most quoted verses. Karmani eva adhikaraste. Adhikara means to have the concern. I have the right. When we talk of rights, you say you have the right only to your duty, not to the phala, not to the results. Ma karma phale hetur bhur ma te sango asti akarmani. At the same time, do not become attached to non-action. So there is this beautiful, delicate balance to be maintained. You are not getting benefit motivated, at the same time you are not following to non-action either. Your concern should be with action as such alone, not for any benefits ever. Do not become benefit motivated, be not attached to inaction either. Engage in activity, O Dhananjaya, taking your stand on the unitive way, discarding attachments and capable of regarding both attainment and non-attainment as the same. In sameness consists the unitive way. So this is the central discipline that has to be done. How to maintain a sameness. It's an even-tempered activity. Everybody acts, but the yogi acts with even-temperedness. Maintaining this balance between attainment and non-attainment, not affected by gain or no gain, and yet performing your actions. Far inferior is the way of action to the unitive way of reason, O Dhananjaya. Resort to reason for final refuge. Pitiful are they who are benefit motivated. So benefit motivation becomes the chief cause for bondage. It makes the vasanas get stronger. It makes all kinds of tensions and agitations, and it even prevents a person's clear thinking. So this benefit motivation should be abandoned. It is like saying, do your best and let the results take care of themselves. Take care of your presence and the future will take care of itself. Paying full attention to our duties. Affiliated to reason, one leaves behind here both meritorious and unmeritorious deeds. Therefore, affiliate yourself to the unitive way. Yoga is reason in action. This is another definition of yoga. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. So the element of reason or intuition which sublimates and purifies action. So one is a mechanistic action where you are working as a machine or an automaton. But this is not the yogic way. When you say yoga karmasu kaushalam, it means the element of intuition comes in, reasoning comes in. You are using an intelligence to sublimate and purify the action. The actions that are brutish have to become more and more sublime. So it is like a vertical ascent. Through your actions you are raising yourself. Affiliated to reason, one leaves behind here both meritorious and unmeritorious deeds. Therefore, affiliate yourself to the unitive way. Yoga is reason in action. By affiliation to unitive reason, wise men, transcending birth bondage, renouncing benefit interest, go onward to a state beyond all pain. When your reason has transcended the dross of vagueness, then you attain to that neutral attitude, both in respect of what is to be learnt and what has already been learnt. When disillusioned respecting the contradictory injunctions of the scriptures, your reason stands unshaken and steady in samadhi, then you shall have reached yoga. This is the description of the yogic state. When he says affiliation to unitive reason, karmajam buddhi yukta hi. You see buddhi and yukta. Yukta means to join. Conjoining the buddhi, doing karma with a buddhi yukta, using the buddhi. You say you transcend birth bondage, renouncing benefit interest. Benefit interest always makes the mind come down to the transactional plane. When your reason has transcended the dross of vagueness, then you attain to that neutral attitude, both in respect of what is to be learnt and what has already been heard. And when disillusioned respecting the contradictory injunctions of the scriptures. If you read the Vedas, they are full of contradictions. And when you become disillusioned regarding the contradictory injunctions, your reason stands unshaken. But by following the yogic path, by keeping the bipolarity, you attain the samadhi state. Samadhi means samadhi. Dhi is your buddhi. When your intellect has become balanced, sama or equalized, then you say you are in samadhi. With samadhi state, you can perform all your actions with great efficiency, with great depth, and with total undisturbed state. So that is the state which is most beneficial. But Arjuna is a skeptic. He says, what is the way? Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha. Prajna means this knowledge or this understanding. Sthita means established, steadied. So he says, what is the state of the sthita prajna? Samadhistasya keshava. Sthitadhihi kim prabhashet, kim asit vrajet kim. How does he live? How does he walk? How does he discourse? What is his state of being? How does he move about? So then, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, this part of the Gita formed Gandhi's daily evening prayer. Prajahi yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmani eva atmana tushtaha sthita prajnas tada uchyate. He says, one banishes all desires that enter the mind. O Partha, satisfied in the self by the self alone, then he is said to be one of well-founded reason. So you say you are not attached to any outside value. Established in the self means I am not attached to any outer values. I find my stability within myself. He whose mind is unaffected by mishaps, who on happy occasions too evinces no interest, rising above attachment, anxiety or anger, such a sage recluse is said to be of well-founded reason. Now this contemplative life that we speak of, we say vigataha spraha, having no interest. Vita raga bhaya krodha. These are the three enemies of contemplation. Raga, bhaya and krodha. Raga means attachment, bhaya is fear and krodha is anger. So when you have risen above that level, when you have no more sense of attachment, no more sense of anxiety and no more anger, then you say your reason is well founded. Only then your reasoning will function as a steady manner. Contemplative is not depressed because you are not having a good time in society, nor exuberant in gay company. So he is free from these fluctuating moods. That's the difference between a yogi and a yogi. A yogi will, if he sees other people having a good time, he will get depressed. And when he is having a good time, he can lose himself, get so exuberant. So this attitude is not there in the yogi. So he remains calm in all cases, unattached on gaining such or such desirable, undesirable end, who neither welcomes anything nor rejects in anger. His reason is well founded. Then we have the image of the tortoise withdrawing its limbs. Just like that, the yogi is able to withdraw the senses from the sense objects. The sense objects are like 5 horses which are always taking the mind outside. And from that we have to bring about an inwardness, turning the senses away from their objects, so that the object never can distract the person. Objective interests revert without the relish for them. But even then the vasana will remain. And the vasana will only be removed when the person has the darshan, when you have an actual vision of the self. Only then the person is completely rid of them. Otherwise they will remain as latent form. And when the opportunity arises, you find vasana can always spring out. So you can starve a vasana, but this yoga method is to weaken, to get rid of the vasanas. Even when a man of wisdom, O son of Kunti, in spite of his effort, excited sense interest can forcibly distract the mind. So it's so powerful is this distraction that even men of wisdom can be distracted. But restraining every one of them, he should rest unitively established, having me for his supreme ideal. He in whom sense interests are subdued, his reason is well founded. So mechanical or ordinary reasoning does not avail without the bipolarity implied in all dialectical reasoning. So it's not just mechanistically you are not trying to suppress or control, but you are taking your mind, you are fixing it to a higher ideal, or you are fixing it to a higher thought. When you talk of Supreme or God, your Ishtadevata or your Guru. So you are directing the mind, giving it a higher current. And by putting it into a higher current, automatically the lower interests or the sense interests, they become withdrawn. You are able to move away from the distractions of the sensory world. Only then the buddhi will function in a very calm and balanced or unitive way. This is verse 61. 62 and 63, we have the psychological analysis of a situation in which one perishes contemplatively. So the perishing that we speak of here, the falling that Gita speaks of, perishing, falling, destruction, these are all contemplatively to be understood. In the contemplative's life, there is a perishing, there is a destruction. It means the inner peace of a person can be lost or disturbed. In that sense he perishes, not that he will be destroyed. He can still be living, but he will lose the contemplative steadiness. Meditating on objects of interest, there is born in man an attachment for them. From attachment arises passion. In the face of passion frustrated arises rage. This is the typical psychology that you see even in young people when they get angry, when they have a desire for something. If that desire is blocked or frustrated, the person gets completely full of anger, full of rage. Why? Because beforehand you are meditating on the object. And when by meditating on the object, there is an attachment for it. And from the attachment rises passion. The raga comes, sangha comes. From sangha comes kamaha. And from kama, frustrated, comes anger. So this is the enemy of contemplation. Krodhat bhavati sammohaha. So from rage is produced distortion of values. From distortion of values, memory lapse. From memory lapse comes loss of reason. And from loss of reason, he perishes. So the perishing here is contemplatively he perishes. And he whose self is subdued, this is the reverse case, where you say his self is subdued, whose attachment and aversions are both within the sway of the self. So it is not that you don't have an attachment or you don't have attractions, but they don't go out of the sway of the self. It's like a pendulum or a swing that is within your scope of control or within your sphere. So it never goes out of you. So even though anger arises, any passion arises, you are still able to hold it within your ambit and pull it back. When you can do that, then you say you have got the yogic way. And though his senses still move amid sense interests, he wends towards a state of spiritual clarity. So he said the consciousness of the global unity of self is conducive in peace or absence of conflict is called prasada. This is the definition of prasada, which is in the next chapter. He said prasade, by spiritual clarity that takes place the effacement of him of all suffering. And for one whose spirit has become lucid, very soon reasoning becomes properly founded. Spiritual clarity takes place. So if a person is able to rid yourself of this passion or keep the passion within the sway, in time what happens is that spiritual clarity comes. And with the spiritual clarity, all the suffering goes away. And you become lucid, your mind becomes absolutely clear, and your reasoning becomes properly founded. So this is the goal of the yogi. For one unbalanced, there is no reason, and there cannot be any creative intuition either. And for one incapable of creative intuition, there can be no peace. And for the unpeaceful, there can be no happiness. So indriyanam hi charatam yan mano anuvidhiyate tadasya harati prajnam vayur navam ivambhasi. Still moving amid sense interests, that item to which the mind submits draws away the reasoning as the wind does a ship on the waters. So that is the difficulty, that even if you have one small sense interest, that can draw the mind away. Tasmad yasya mahabaho nighritani sarvasaha indriyani indriyabhyas tasya prajna pratishtita. He says, whose senses have been in every way withdrawn from sense interest. This is the first level where we are talking of sense interest, because the Gita is also raising us chapter by chapter to higher and higher levels. For the beginners, or for the person still living in the world, the first thing that we encounter is the sense interest. And the first thing to be disciplined is the sense interest. What is night for all creatures, the one of self-control keeps awake therein, wherein all creatures are wakeful. That is night for the sage recluse who sees. So in a sense you can say contemplative lives in a world of his own. The contemplative life may not appear as a regular life in the eyes of the social person, because his values are quite different. Still getting filled while fixed firmly in immobility, the ocean remains so. So too he into whom all interests enter. He attains to peace, not the craver of desires. So desire is like a flame. The more you feed it, the bigger it becomes, so that peace can never come to the craver of desires. But like the ocean, it remains immobile. So many streams are flowing, rivers are flowing, but we see that the ocean maintains its level. You don't see the ocean spilling over its banks. It has a way to absorb all the streams coming into it. So too is the yogic way. So all the interests enter into him, all the functions enter, but he is able to keep his steadiness and keep his peace. That man who, giving up all attachment, moves about desirelessly, without owning anything and without egoism, he goes to peace. This we find in the higher states of mind for the evolved people. They have all given up the attachments and moving about desirelessly, without owning anything. So, nirmamaha. Nirmamaha, mama means mind, without a sense of mind. And nirahankara, without an egoism, he goes to peace. These are the secrets of peace. Such a person goes to peace. So egoism, you can say, is the root cause and first enemy of contemplation. It is the base of the possessive relationship, either personal, ideological, or objective. And that is a very hard thing to do, but that is towards which we work. We say this is the state of being in the absolute, O Partha, on reaching which one suffers from delusion no more. Brahmi Sthiti. This is the other goal towards which we are reaching, becoming a Brahmi Sthiti. Established in this, at the very last moment of life, one reaches that final goal of pure being in the absolute. So, Richati Brahma Nirvanam. This practice will culminate in the Brahma Nirvanam. People say after death, you hear people reading the Gita, it's useless. Nothing is going to happen to a person at the deathbed when you start reading the Gita. It's only after a lifetime or many years of practice and self-discipline and proper unitive thinking and proper bipolarity that you find at the last minute of life you are merging. You will feel the sense of merging. So you have this idea of the sun setting or a gradual fade out. Life becomes like that, gradual fade out, when you are getting into the state of nirvana. The practice begins fairly early. It requires many years of contemplation. The whole idea is contemplation. In the past, the contemplatives were only the recluses, the munis, the rishis, who stayed away from society and went into the retreats and the forests to practice their contemplation. But the Gita gives a method of being a contemplative in the active world also. In the world of action, we can still have that contemplative frame of mind by turning inward and by practicing this self-control and establishing bipolarities. It's very important to establish the bipolarity within, with the higher principle as it is conceived by each one of us in our own ways. We should have that sense of the higher self and then maintain a bipolar relationship with that higher self and establish that relationship through contemplation and prevent the distractions coming from the external world around, or keeping them within the sway, not letting them control you. You have a sense of managing your emotions. How? Because you have the attachment and egoism under control. If you have the sense of no egoism, you have better chances of managing your life through wisdom. But it's not a vacuum. You're not going into a vacuum. You're going into unitive reasoning. Your reasoning is functioning more efficiently now because it is linked to something higher, linked to the spirit. As long as you're linked to the ego, you have a boundary, you have a limit. But if you're linking with the absolute, there is no limit, there is no end, there is no beginning, there is no birth or death. So that is the foundation. So when that becomes our source, naturally, the quality of life changes. So this is the second chapter with which the first teaching is given to Arjuna after he has had his Vishada, after his depression. It's like we said, divided into two portions, Sankhya and Yoga. Sankhya gave us the theoretical aspect and Yoga gives us the practical side, or the method of bipolar thinking and unitive thinking. Central ideas here, Sthita Prajna, the man of steady wisdom, and also knowing one's Swadharma, practicing one's Swadharma. These are two major points to note. And the freeing of bondage, working with sense of freedom, not with the sense of bondage, or using work itself for our salvation. Whatever we have, that becomes instrument of salvation. So that is the central themes here. And the goal, of course, is self-realization. And this takes us to third chapter, Karma Yoga, where we try to understand what is karma. Because the first thing we encounter is karma. We have to resolve the issue of karma, understand the nature of karma, because nobody can escape karma. See, the sannyasis, the main contradiction in their life was when they said we don't perform action because we can't get salvation through action. But breathing is an action, eating is an action. So he says, how can you escape from these karmas? You cannot. So you can't abandon all karmas. You have to keep certain minimum karmas are necessary. So you have to understand what is karma and how we should handle karma, how to handle one's karma. See, Buddhists and Jains, they don't have theism in Jains. Everything is based on karma. And Buddhism also gives a lot of emphasis on karma. So karma is a very central idea in Indian thinking. So Vishada Yoga and Sankhya Yoga. These are the first two chapters. There is an Upanishadic methodology here. See, the structure of the Gita is based on the Upanishads. The Upanishads were dialogues between teachers and their students, pupils, or seekers and the seer, or shishyas and their gurus. So here the same structure is used in the Gita too. Between Arjuna and Krishna, you see that the wisdom dialogue is taking place. And through the dialogue, we are given the science of absolute, Brahma Vidya and Yoga Shastra. So that brings us to the end of this chapter.